but I'm preaching from Judges 4 and 5 today, if you would like to open it in your books. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I just wanted to make sure you know where I will be. Coming from the AME Church, we do topics or themes. So the topic of today would be the spirit of Deborah, a Black woman in leadership. I would also like to thank my friend Johnny. His inspiration for me, bringing me back into the church. The hardest thing about becoming a veteran, other than having to buy real clothes, and not having to wear your uniform every day, is to find out who you were before you served everyone else.
Wow.
And in that transition, you are trying to repair yourself and find yourself at the same time. And in the military, and as a Black woman in the military, there's a lot of yourself that you suppress, like we all do. And it's really hard to, I'm a little nervous. It is a little hard to find out who you would like to be and how to separate yourself from who you had to be. And then imposter syndrome, and Johnny's helped me with that by bringing me back as I work with my recommittal to Christ holy and holy. And I hope that comes out today. So first, Deborah in Judges. I will give a background on what happened in Judges and where her leadership and her calling from God came. So in Judges 4, the Israelites were being oppressed by the Canaanites. For the Lord sent them there to pay for the evil that they had done. And I thought of what evil could they have done for the Lord to send them into bondage and oppression, obviously to teach them a lesson. And I researched and found that they were disobedient. They weren't trusting of God and his plan. They walked away from him and the laws that he gave to Moses for them to follow and started to worship idols in their times of despair instead of going to him. Deborah was the wife of a leader of the Israelites. The people went to Deborah to vent their disputes and to gain insight to solutions for their problems. In the Bible, Deborah was the first and only one that I found that was labeled as a judge and a prophetess. She was known to be wise, express her wisdom, and practice discernment. She was a great person with prophetic insight and had a very close relationship with God. She was a beacon of hope during moral decay and the troubling spirits of men in the Israelite nation. She was obedient to God, standing on faith when others did not. Her leadership stood out because other leaders, especially the men leaders in that time, were led by fear and complacency that dispersed into the people of the nation and expressed worry. The men were scared to rise against Sisera and the Canaanites to fight their oppressors for their freedom. But God, instead of speaking to the men and the leadership of the men, he decided to speak through Deborah. She answered God's call to free the people of Israel because of her relationship and obedience to him. She wasn't power hungry. She wasn't self-serving. She was obedient to her mission and to following the laws of God. She wasn't arrogant, and she led with humility and a strong faith in God's plan. She was the instrument and the spark that was chosen to lift the spirits of her people and break them from their bondage of sin, regret, and lack of faith that they were engulfed in at this time. In this moment, when she was leading the Israelites from the Canaanites' oppression, there was a man by the name of Barak. And Barak was one of the leaders of the Israelites. But when Deborah came to him to instruct him on the plan of how they were going to free the Israelite nation, he had fear, doubt, and trust in what God wanted him to do. He lacked the ability to have confidence in what he was being instructed and leaned on Deborah for strength and reassurance. In the Bible, he stated, "I will not go unless you come with me." For a man to seek her comfort and reassurance to battle, knowing that her relationship with God was so true, showed you the strength of that woman in that time.
Yeah.
And the woman that Black women represent today.
Amen.
Since he decided that he needed her to come along with him, she told him that the Lord said, "The honor of this victory will not come to you, but it will be delivered by the hands of a woman."
Right.
Scriptures, Judges chapter 4, verse 9. So after that moment, after their talk, Barak decided to join Deborah in rallying the troops. To give them inspiration, Deborah told them what God instructed them to do. She reminded them of God's ability to deliver them through any battle, and she emphasized how much can come from trusting in him. When Barak faced the war battle, he looked back at Deborah and was concerned that they were going to lose. And she said, "Go. Has the Lord not gone ahead of you?" Telling him that the path is already set for you as long as you trust him. Chapter 4, verse 14.
All right.
After this, they won the battle. God came and interrupted everything with a flood of rain that made the Canaanites and all their horses and all their gold chariots, all of their weapons that would have helped defeat the Israelites, were of no use. God made sure that this happened so that they could go in victorious. But unexpectedly, the leader of the Canaanites, Sisera, fled the battle scene, seeing that they were losing, in hopes that he could find refuge in the tent of a woman by the name of Jael. Jael was another unexpected woman who was chosen by God to deliver the Israelites. She provided him security and nourishment. He asked for water, and she gave him fresh milk, something to help him get really comfortable and tired. And then she offered him shelter by even giving him a blanket to get him really good and comfortable. She chose that nourishing side and that femininity of a woman to make him feel good about what he had done and how that he had fled. But, like Deborah, Jael was spoken to by God, and while he was good and comfortable, she decided to impale him with the weapons from her house. In his sleep, she killed Sisera. So the prophecy of Deborah finally came to fruition. The Israelites were freed, not by man and their strength, but by the hands of a woman.
All right.
In this moment, once Barak came to the tent looking for Sisera, Jael showed him where he was, and he realized that Deborah knew all along, and his faith in God was reinstilled.
Yeah.
Now that is the story that I'm going to preach from about my personal life and experience in the military as a Black woman and as a veteran now today. So I joined the Coast Guard as an enlisted woman in 2016. I went to North Carolina A&T, and they had a special scholarship program for students who went to a HBCU. This program was a version of ROTC, but it was more geared towards those of minority descent, minority backgrounds. The Coast Guard Academy at that time wasn't producing officers that represented everyone. So they went to find where the minority was, and that was at historically Black colleges. So I was at North Carolina A&T. I was trying to figure out how I was going to help my mom pay for school, how I was going to pay for school, and what I was going to do when school was over, because it doesn't last forever. And I decided that I was raised to serve others, especially my family, and it wouldn't hurt to serve a little bit for the country for 4 years if I could handle college. So I did, being the first female in the family to join the military. A lot of concern and worry was for me. And I grew up in Baltimore, which is very predominantly African American. So joining the military was a little isolating, a little uncomfortable. I felt isolated, withdrawn, and I felt like the stereotypes of Black women was on my shoulders, regardless if I succeeded or failed. One big part that stood out to me when I was on my ship, I served on the Coast Guard Cutter Forward. That was my first time being on a ship and my first actual job in the military. And I was led to be in charge of 15 enlisted people, including 2 chiefs who served longer than I had been alive. And I didn't know how I would lead them and how they would follow me, Black women who didn't go to the academy and really needed to learn a lot. But at that time, they found refuge in me. For some reason, they found that they could come and talk to me. And I learned that I wanted to lead from personal instead of positional power. In the military, positional power is those who use their rank to show fear or to gain respect. They use it. They show dominance and assertiveness. But personal leadership is those who have inspiration, empathy, and compassion. And I feel like when you serve people and you show them that you're willing to go where they are and meet them where they're at, they will bend over backwards and support you. And I needed them because I stood alone. I learned how to be confident, how to be sure of myself, because when I spoke to senior leadership, I was speaking on behalf of my people behind me. They weren't there with me. I had to speak for them. And to speak for them, I had to go into rooms where I represented not just them, but every African-American woman that came behind me or that was before me. That type of pressure, when you fail, the community fails. The next person, they don't expect much from them because I failed. And when you succeed, there is no recognition. There is no good job. You were supposed to do that. So your failures speak louder than your success because that's what you're supposed to do. But the failures hit me more because it represented someone else that's going to come behind me and I can't fail them. So that's where God led me to serve and to learn and to be a student of every moment that I embraced.
Yeah.
At sea, we're surrounded by water all the time. You only have 270 feet with the same people for 3 months.
Yeah.
It's very hard to not just find God, but keep a close relationship with God when you're away from everything that you know and everyone who knows you. You're tempted by a lot of things, and you're tempted by a lot of vices. And those vices can fill the void of that is missed. During my ski time, we experienced the government shutdown. The Coast Guard is a federal entity. It's not Department of Defense like everyone else. We're federal workers like the post office or anywhere else. So when the government shutdown happened, we didn't have any money like the other branches did. So while we were at sea, we couldn't pull into ports because we had no money. Usually when you're at sea, you should pull in every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just to keep the crew's morale high because you have no signal, there's nothing. We were at sea straight for 35 days without seeing land, without being able to call home. And during the government shutdown, a lot of my enlisted crew were worried about their families. How are they paying rent right now if I'm not there and no check is coming? During that time, we had to really find a way. We had a chaplain on board, and I instructed my enlisted to go to the chaplain, and I went with them. If it took extra hours, I stayed up with them, found ways to preach to them. Maybe not exactly from the Bible, but I let God use me as a vessel to inspire them, give them faith, and help them be strong in those moments because I knew the end was coming. So those are ways that I use, or that I let God use me, even though I didn't know He was. It's just what I felt needed to happen, and now I know. While serving at Cape May, as Johnny said, I was in the training division. So I instructed the recruits, I trained them. I didn't yell at them often because I don't like yelling, but if I had to, I would. But you would see a lot of Black recruits just like me who were one of 100 or 2 of 95. And as soon as that other Black female may have dropped off or got pushed back, there was one by herself. I spent a lot of time doing their hair because Cape May, there is no beauty salon for those recruits. They would come with braids. It seemed small to others, but for us, I knew that their identity was led by that. That's all they had to express themselves was through their hair. A lot of the military thinks you need to wash your hair out all the time to get the gel out, and their hair was breaking. It was falling out. They were crying. They were going to me and Johnny. They just felt like they were always being put to the front because they couldn't hide like everyone else could. So I would spend nights doing their hair the best that I can to get them in regulation so they wouldn't stand out for not being according to the book. During my hard days in the military, whenever I walked across the Cape May base, a Black female recruit would look at me and I would see that they saw something and they got that push to keep going forward. Even though I was walking to get fresh air and get some peace, that one Black recruit that saw me felt like they could go on with their day and they could finish training. I didn't know it until they graduated and they told me, and I realized that my hard days were somebody else's good ones. So those are my leadership experience and how I led my people. And I will let you know a little personal background and a takeaway from Deborah, so I won't keep you long. But I got this personality because I was raised by my elders. My mom was a single mom. My dad was present. I love my dad. He's awesome. But my mom was the single mother at that time, and my grandmother raised me to help support her so she can go to work in school. Being raised by a Southern woman, she was born in 1934. I was born in 1994. So I spent a lot of time at the feet of those who lived generations before me, and I learned from them.
Yeah.
There's a type of regalness and a type of strength that comes from Southern Black women. And I never knew their stories because I was young. I just saw my grandmother cook and I saw her pray. But I didn't know what she was praying about and why she prayed so much. But she was praying for us.
Yeah.
And she was praying for her past. And that she never showed worry or concern because she saw us and put it in us to lead and accomplish what she couldn't. Without her in this time, it's really hard to find calm and peace when the elders that carried that type of sense of faith are gone and disappearing for us. Being a millennial young Black woman, it is hard to avoid temptation and worldly things and not have that grounded leadership to guide you. So I came back to the church, jumped right in, both feet, called Johnny every night. I found something new in the Bible I wanted to tell someone about. And I realized what my grandmother used to pray for.
Yeah.
As I learned from her feet and I watched her, I learned how to be selfless, reserved, calm, but strong at the same time. She led with her wisdom, she led her family through prayer, and she showed that she would never be shaken or worrisome. And she showed this just like Deborah did. And just like every Black woman I know in here has that story of having to do. The cape that Black women have to wear to save everyone else and save themselves, there's a lot of time where you can't be vulnerable or expressive because that is where the stereotypes can slip in. When you grow up in a matriarchy, you don't realize that those women were going into the world of patriarchy. But to you, they led everything in the house, but outside, they weren't seen as that same way. I saw Deborah and my grandmother. I see Deborah in every Black woman. I see Deborah in all of you today. We show our wisdom and we show our discernment through God. And I pray that we continue to lead by faith and not by sight, no matter how hard it is. Amen. Black women have led in history with these values. From the Women's Suffrage March, where they weren't getting any benefits from it, but they marched along, those white women, to get theirs for them, while they didn't receive the same things. From the Black Panthers and Angela Davis, when all of the Black men and the leaders of the Panthers were being locked up, it was the Black women that kept the Panther community strong. Yeah. Through civil rights, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X's wife, and Martin Luther King's wife, without these women, a lot of laws weren't passed when they were in jail. Who kept the story going? Yeah. It was their women.
Amen. That's right.
Just like Barack had to lean on Deborah, a lot of our men lean on us, mostly in private, not really in public, but we know who really runs the show. Last but not least, something that is current. I saw the faces of Black women, Black vets at the Veteran Hospital the day after the inauguration. The day after we lost, and I say we as Kamala Harris, to see a Black woman on that type of a stage with all the accolades and everything that she had earned be passed over for something that she deserved wasn't a new story to us, but it was a story that was seen by everyone at the same time. And it was a lot harder to swallow when it comes from someone at the very top experiencing that with no backup and no backup plan. A lot of us, we go to our families and we can, hide and regroup and collect ourselves, but she had to stand strong for the rest of us because she knew that this happens to us all the time. In that moment, I saw Black veterans that came to me more and more those days after and continue to come to me as I worry if I will have a job because Veterans Affairs, Education, and Social Security offices of the federal agencies are being laid off every day. Not knowing whether I'll have a job today or tomorrow, I know the impact of those who are facing mental health issues and the Black women who experience sexual trauma, who come to me for help, who come to me to go to the director to let them know their problems, rely on me to be steadfast, and I do my best to do that. After learning about Deborah in preparation for today, I have a few takeaways that I would like all of us to think about. In the face of adversity and fear, God chose these two women, Deborah and Jael, to deliver his people and show them his power and remind them who is actually in charge. God doesn't need flawless, faithful servants, but those who are obedient to him, because there is a difference. Amen. The victory of the Israelites was not won by human strength alone or by man, It was won by divine intervention and salvation through these two strong women.
Amen.
Nothing could stand against God, the hand of God, when you have trust and obedience in Him. Amen. And that is what I have for today.
Amen.